world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 15th of June, year of our Lord 2026. Well, it's Circus Maximus, as we have at the White House yesterday, but there was more spin, I think, in terms of the memo of understanding than there was in the ring. We're going to take a look at the supposed the birthday party for Trump and what one senator, a Democrat, has called a gigantic birthday gift for Trump. $25 billion of Iranian funds released. If this is true, because we've had, this is like the 38th or 39th time that Trump has said we've got a ceasefire set up and a peace agreement going to end the war. So if this really does go through, what is being gained at what cost? And we're going to talk about the rapid expansion of not only government confiscation of homes, a horrific story out of Hawaii, but we're going to look at what's happening with artificial intelligence. The Ponzi bubble is getting bigger and bigger. When is it going to bust? Well, it may be coming soon. We'll be right back. Well, thanks to a lawsuit that tried to stop the big fighting party that Trump had staged, we know that they spent $60 million and 7 federal agencies were involved to set up Trump's staged fight. And of course, all of his fights are staged, aren't they? He's had staged fights with Canada, Greenland, you name it. Everybody he stages a fight with. And so I guess the question is, can he blow out all the candles on the debt? Well, he's going to work at that. And they are printing money behind the scenes faster than anybody can imagine. And that's the big head fake. They've got everybody looking at interest rates. They got everybody looking at the consumer price index, which they have rigged. They don't count food or energy in it. But the real issue with the inflation is not just the price inflation from the military action that he took, but it's also what is being done by the printing, the quantitative easing that has ramped up yet again. But looking at this lawsuit that was filed, you had a couple of people who decided they wanted to stop this because they thought it was tacky and stupid, which I agree with, but I wouldn't go to the trouble of filing a lawsuit to stop it because pretty much everything that Trump does is tacky and stupid. Anyway, they tried to stop it. And so as a result, in terms of arguing for its continuance, saw the same kind of arguments from the Trump administration that we see for continuing the tariffs. Well, hey, we got so much money involved, it's going to be a real problem if we try to walk this back. And so they pointed out that there had been $60 million. Of course, it was raised by individuals. They said the money came from the UFC and by groups affiliated with it. Yeah, right. And then what do they get for this? You know, we've seen a pretty consistent thing, and I've reported this over and over again throughout the years. Somehow, when these people give money to presidents, and it's not just Trump, he's more open about it than anybody else has been. But it happens with the Democrats as well. You give them $1 million, you get $1 billion in contract. What does the UFC get out of this? It remains to be seen. You know, we had that guy, his name was Justin Sun. Remember him, as Chinese guy. He spent $5 million on that banana that was duct taped to a wall as a piece of art. And this guy's just throwing money away. I mean, he's so filthy rich with his cryptocurrency scams. And then the SEC got involved in it and was coming after him, big, really big fines. But he was an early supporter of the Trump family's criminal enterprise, World Liberty Financial, like WLF. It should be WTF, right? Should be the World Trump Financial, and then the initials would spell what it really was about. Anyway, he was a seminal investor in that. And so he put a lot of money into that. I put in $30 million into that. Because, I mean, hey, if you're going to spend $5 million on a banana duct tape to the wall. Why not give $30 million to a Trump crypto venture? That's genius compared to the investment in art that he made. But, funny thing about that, it came with a certificate from the artist saying that he could replace the banana at will, and it wouldn't affect the art. That is a great analogy for crypto in and of itself, isn't it? I mean, a guy who has made money selling the crypto nonsense gets had by somebody selling a banana duct tape to a wall. Nevertheless, he put in $30 million at an early stage, really helping the Trump crime family. And then he put in some more money, $75 million more on various other Trump projects. So this guy is in with the Trumps for over $100 million. Guess what? As soon as the Trumps get in, February of 2025, 1 month after he gets sworn in, maybe not even that long because he got sworn in the end of January, his SEC investigation just goes away with a very small fine for one of his companies. So what do the UFC people get out of all this stuff? And so in pushing back against this lawsuit, the Trump administration said, well, there's been 7 agencies as well, including Homeland Security and the FAA. They have allocated significant resources and manpower. So we have this sunk cost, and we need to continue on. The same argument they made with the tariffs. But anyway, they prevailed in that, and the spectacle continued, and it looked something like this. Do we have that in here? Let's see. I've got a different clip here. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, motorcycle jumping in front of the White House. I looked at that and I thought, is that jumping the shark? I guess not for Trump. That is exactly what he wants. So anyway, he bets on the South Lawn UFC spectacle to energize his political base because this is what his political base has become. Idiocracy. Here's a clip.
He always finds a way to win. And when he's back in our White House, America is going to start winning again.
He's got a higher IQ than any man alive. He's going to fix everything.
The price of food and gas
RNC versus
and housing is out of control.
Idiocracy.
And the only person who can clean this up is Donald Trump.
He'll fix the problems with all the dead crop. He's going to make them grow again.
He's going to win in November, and we're all going to be champions again when he wins.
I give you my word. He's going to fix that harmony.
Let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Trumpomania make America great again. Yeah, maybe there was a purpose to all this. When the Iranians see just how crazy America is, and we've used nuclear weapons on other countries before, and we got people like Mark Levin egging him on. So it's like, hey, maybe we should talk to this guy. It's maybe it's a negotiating tactic. Show people just how crazy you are. Well, maybe it worked. It's surreal to see this stuff being pulled off, said a guy who was visiting, a supporter of Trump. He said, it's like the Colosseum in real life. Well, I don't know. I don't think the Romans had motorcycles, but were they this tacky? They probably were. So there's an opinion piece from the Daily Beast, which was actually kind of amusing, going over the edge in the other direction, talking about Trump's bloodlust. And this whole article is on this theme of blood, blood, blood. And yet, you would think that if he's going to talk about blood and Trump's bloodlust, you would think he might mention the fact that he's doing extrajudicial killings. We just had another one where he, nuked from air, not nuked, but took out the headquarters of the guy who's supposedly the head of the Trendy gang, Trendy Uruguay, whatever, the Venezuelan gang. Extrajudicial killings. Look, this guy may be, but why didn't Elliot Ness just drive to Al Capone's house and just open him a machine gun on him? That's what Pete Hegseth would do, right? That's what the U.S. military would do. Look, folks, we have a situation, a rule of law in this country that's supposed to be effective, which says that even for a capital, especially for a capital offense, but even when it's a capital crime, you got video of some guy in a mass shooting, let's say, killing a bunch of people. Well, it's pretty clear he did it. You don't just have the deputies, take him out back and, shoot him on the spot necessarily. I mean, usually that's the way these things end up. But what I'm saying is, if there is a crime, you don't just shoot the person on Fifth Avenue, as Trump said his supporters would cheer him. And now they're doing that. You don't look at a boat in the water and say, I think they're shipping drugs, and you blow everybody up, except that, there's still some survivors. So you circle back around and you machine gun the survivors in the water. I mean, how many layers of criminal ethics and criminal violations of the law are involved in that? It's absolutely amazing. And they continue to do it. And, when you're talking about people who are shipping drugs, that is not even a capital offense according to the law. But of course, we don't care about the law anymore, right? If we cared about the law, we would arrest the people, we would take them to court, we'd go through due process, and you'd apply the penalties that are in the law. Even though I don't agree with the war on drugs, and it hasn't worked, has it? What it's done is it's corrupted our government to the extent now. I mean, this is a level that I really didn't think would happen. I thought it was going to be, the kind of kickbacks and corrupt cops and corrupt judges and that type of thing that we've seen now for decades. Now it's gone to the stage of the Philippines, where if you suspect somebody's a drug dealer, just kill them right there. We don't want to have that. They can be wrong about things like that. And that's why I say, even if somebody is a serial killer and there's really good evidence, you have to still give them due process, because the most dangerous killer of all is a government without any legal restraints on it. And that's what he has created. And so you got this article here from the Daily Beast talking about blood, his bloodlust and this and that. It doesn't talk about his wars. Doesn't talk about the extrajudicial killings that are happening in South America on a regular basis. Doesn't talk about the war of aggression without a declaration for a foreign country, attacking and targeting civilians, threatening to wipe out entire civilizations. Somehow this guy, the Daily Beast, just forgot all that. Instead, he starts talking about Trump and his obsession with his own blood, and the fact that he boasts about the fact that he's taking a lot of aspirin. When you have a heart issue or something, you always have doctors who will prescribe baby aspirin for you. And typically what they do is they prescribe a small amount, 80 milligrams. He's taking 325 milligrams, which this author says is 3 times the dosage, which I thought was really kind of funny. It stuck out to me because, we're talking about the Daily Beast here. These people are just hacks. A, he doesn't know, or B, he's incapable of dividing 80 into 325, because that's 4 times what the doctors would typically recommend for something like that. And he claims that he doesn't have any history of stroke or heart attack. And that's not what the doctors are talking about. But that's what he focuses on. He focuses on that, and he focuses on the UFC fight. But he talks about blood. He doesn't talk about extrajudicial killings. He doesn't talk about wars, about attacking civilians, about threatening to destroy civilizations. This is what is insane about the opposition to Trump. This is, as much as it is, that's what they push back against. He said it is an obsession, a dystopic science fiction proportions. And I got to say, when you look at this thing that was put up, again, I think it's pretty ugly, but Trump loves it. He thinks it ought to stay up forever. I reported that last week. He says, yeah, maybe like the Eiffel Tower. They put that up just for an event, but then they decide to keep it up forever. And it's like, this thing that you put up may be an Eiffel. It may be awful, but it's not the Eiffel Tower. It has absolutely no aesthetic appeal. There it is. That is, it's kind of like graffiti on a building. But besides all of that, this guy says, oh, yeah, it's like a dystopic science fiction proportions. No, what is happening with artificial intelligence is really, and digital ID is really what is of dystopic science fiction proportions. What Marsha Blackburn is doing is really what is, and Trump. She's the one carrying the water for Trump in terms of AI and digital ID. She just came after a website with demands of this last week. And she is pushing one piece of legislation after the other to get rid of any state or local opposition. This is a woman who most likely will be, she's the odds-on faraway favorite to win the governorship here in Tennessee, unfortunately. This is someone who wants to be governor of a state who has nothing but contempt for the 10th Amendment, nothing but contempt for search warrants, nothing but contempt for rights. She wants to turn everything in the digital sphere into a government-granted privilege. She's not fit to be a dog catcher, let alone governor. Marsha. Yeah, you're going to get on her Blackburn blacklist. It's just amazing to see what she's doing here. But again, they miss the big issues that are here. While they're mired in the metaphor of a literal war, Trump and Lindsey and Levin and Shapiro are putting all the setting in the bleachers and cheering for a real war, not a metaphorical war that these gladiator contests represent. I mean, you can look at people at spectator sport. One of the things that came out over the weekend, of course, the UFC did their own meme, and it was better than typically what you would see with Trump. It wasn't as cartoonish. They had Teddy Roosevelt. They talked about how he was so big on the fact that, Americans need to learn how to fight. And so he was constantly having people come in as sparring partners and that type of thing. And so they were talking about him training in the White House and sparring with all these different boxers and everything. And the whole man in the arena thing. So, oh, you want to criticize us? Well, don't criticize the man in the arena. Well, guess what? Trump is not the man in the arena, as they were doing it. Trump is not sparring with people except verbally. And yet he is wielding the weapons of mass destruction against one country after the other. And doing it in a way that has utter contempt for the rule of law, for any moral law that is there. And so you got people like Trump and Lindsey Graham sitting in the bleachers watching this UFC contest. They're sitting in the bleachers and cheering as they send off real gladiators to risk their lives to some extent, not nearly as much as it's a very one-sided contest. It's kind of like sending somebody out with a sword versus a lion. When you're talking about the Iranians being the guy with a sword versus a lion, maybe they give him a short Sikh ceremonial life. I would put my money on the lion, but these guys are basically, they're sending them out again to massacre civilians for his pride, for his ego, for his power lust, his ego politics. Orders to kill, except that the real Caesar is not Trump. The real Caesar is in Israel. And I want to talk about something that we haven't talked about yet. And we talked last week about the fact that this merger between the U.S. military and the Israeli military. And the purpose behind all that, of course, was the fact that Americans are not happy about the fact that we've given Israel $300 billion. Most Americans are not happy about the way that Israel has used it to attack their neighbors, to commit genocide against the people in Gaza. And so there's a lot of pushback against that. And, Netanyahu is staying one step ahead of public opinion as he looks at the pushback in public opinion. And he thinks, well, maybe they're going to cut this off. He says, I don't want that kind of money sent to me anymore. Instead, what he's doing is he's negotiating a backdoor merger so that they will actually benefit in a closed way, in a hidden way. As public opinion is turning against him, he just goes underground. Well, there's also something else that we did not talk about. We talked about that last week, but we did not talk about this other piece of the puzzle. And that is something that's put in by Tom Cotton, a guy who has received a great deal of Zionist money, a senator who is head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And he has put in a measure that would dramatically increase Israel's access to American secrets. I mean, the amazing thing about it is that this Senate bill would require the president, all presidents, current and future, require them to share intelligence with Israel. And he would have to get special permission to not share any intelligence. Isn't that amazing? And this article from Responsible Statecraft really nails it. And it said what is really strange is when you stop and think about how the Senate and how Congress has abdicated its responsibility on tariffs, abdicated its constitutional responsibility on declaring war. Both of those things are their patent. They just are saying, we don't want to do it. We'll just kick it over to the executive branch. But when it comes to Israel and when it comes to spying, now they want to be very hands-on. Number one, first of all, we're going to pass a law saying you must give them all of our intelligence. And secondly, if you want to withhold anything, you've got to come to us. So they're going to micromanage the presidency on something that really should be, if it's going to exist at all. I'm not a fan of the intelligence agencies, but to the extent that it exists, it makes sense for that to be in the executive branch. It's not something that you can micromanage by these large bodies that have to deliberate on things openly. So it's a 192-page intelligence authorization bill. So they stick the merger of the U.S. military with the Israeli military into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, okay, which is always a must-pass bill. They have a similar one, which is nearly 200 pages long, that does the same thing for the intelligence agencies, the Intelligence Authorization Bill. This is put in Section 622. The title is United States-Israeli Intelligence Sharing Enhancement. It requires the president to expand and to enhance intelligence sharing with the government of Israel, quote unquote. A list of subjects that encompass almost every topic of intelligence interest in the Middle East. The bill was put forward by Senator Tom Cotton, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It prohibits any suspension, any reduction, any limitations of such sharing. Excuse me. Except on the basis of a specific and identifiable national security concern that be determined by the president. However, any such exception would require the president, if he determines that there's something that's in our national security that we shouldn't tell them, he's got to go to Congress within 15 days and let them openly debate it and report it to the Israelis.
Let's discuss this extremely sensitive information on the Senate floor to determine whether or not we should make it public to Israel.
Yeah, this is Tom Cotton. This guy should get the Jonathan Pollard Award. We really should start handing out a Jonathan Pollard Award to all these people who have betrayed us to Israel. And understand that Jonathan Pollard was not doing this because he's some diehard Jew who loves his people and his country or whatever. He was shopping around this stuff to a lot of different countries at the time. And, besides Israel. And, of course, the information they turned over to Israel was used to allow more people to immigrate from the USSR that were Jewish, right? Wanted them to be able to immigrate to Israel. And for that, they betrayed American soldiers and sailors. It's we see this same movie being played over and over again, don't we? The betrayal of American soldiers and sailors. Oh, well, let's merge the two militaries together. It'll help them do that even more so. Again, when I look at this and what Tom Cotton has done, in this environment where the respect for the Israeli government is just in free fall, how arrogant, how tone deaf of the Republican Party, of people like Tom Cotton. It just shows how thoroughly they are owned by the state of Israel, that they would even do something like this. So, again, one of several recent moves, says Responsible Statecraft, by those in Washington who carry the Israeli government's water to keep the United States tied to Israel, despite plummeting support. The U.S. support for Israel has been more than $300 billion in economic terms. Netanyahu's tried to get ahead of the declining public support and avoid embarrassing losses by suggesting that it would be fine with him to phase out the military aid. Let's forget the military. Let's just merge the two militaries together. Because I'd rather have you guys go fight our wars anyway, right? Israel's strategy includes forms of military integration that are less visible than congressionally appropriated grant aid, therefore less publicly accountable. Section 224 of a defense authorization bill, currently in the House of Representatives, embodies this form of integration. The mandating of intelligence sharing carries a strategy further by moving it into the shadowy world of relations between intelligence agencies. That world is even farther removed from public visibility and accountability than the defense integration. So as bad as the Pentagon is in terms of their transparency, in terms of the fact that they have been audited a few times, but they've never passed an audit. So most of the big problems in Washington, like the Federal Reserve or the intelligence agencies, they're never even audited. Yeah, you get to audit the Pentagon, but then they don't have to pass the audit and nothing happens to them when they fail the audit. But it's slightly more open. This is even, the intelligence people are even more hidden, more corrupt, more shadowy, more black budget. The mandating of intelligence sharings carries the strategy even further. And Section 622 of the intelligence bill has received far less attention than Section 224 of the defense bill. The notion of legislating an intelligence liaison relationship this way with any foreign country is bizarre. Yes, it is absolutely amazing when you stop and think about it. And let me just say this before I go any further. Is there a corresponding sister bill in the Knesset that would mandate that Israel shares any intelligence with us? Oh, no. Oh, of course not. This is a one-way street. This is a unilateral agreement. This shows you, folks, who owns our government. It's not even a question, not even a remote question anymore, that you've got people in the Senate and in the House who want to merge our military and put it at their disposal, merge our intelligence and put it at their disposal, and to tie the hands of any president and say, you're going to give them everything or you're going to be in violation of the law. And you're going to have to, if it's something that you want to hold back, you've got to come and tell us that you're holding it back. What an absurdity that is.
Of course, connecting the militaries like that would also tie the hands of any president that wanted to restrict money going to them, because they'll just be helping themselves to the military budget. So now it's going to be a whole big thing of, you've got to restructure your entire military spending bills and whatnot if you want to restrict any money going to Israel.
That's right. And so what this article explores, I said, when you look at the intelligence community, there are liaison relationships that are there, but never anything to this extent. No single liaison relationship exists in isolation either. The U.S. intelligence services need to consider possible implications for their other foreign relationships. For example, one generally does not share with country A information about country B if the United States has a relationship with B that is about the same level that it has with A. And so a liaison involves a hierarchy of relationships. What would that hierarchy be? I think there's one country at the top of this now. That's pretty clear. The hierarchy is that Israel controls America. But they point out that because you've got this complicated thing, if you share some intelligence or whatever, hey, I know this about so-and-so, and it's like gossip or something. So he says there's whole staff within the intelligence community whose only job is to monitor and to manage this set of relationships to prevent crossed wires. In other words, what we're talking about here is something that really is like gossip taken to a deadly extreme. Yes, go ahead.
I mean, it goes even farther with that with Israel, with how they've been attacking their neighbors all the time. people that they don't have a bad relationship with and we don't have a bad relationship with, if we give them information on them and then they act on that, that's, immediately tying us into it even before they do anything.
That's right. And that's exactly what is happening with all this stuff. Our national security has been so undermined. The entire world despises Israel just like they despise Trump. As a matter of fact, they just had a referendum in Switzerland, and the referendum itself was, I think, a bit troubling the way they focused on it. They said it was a referendum to limit the number of Swiss citizens to 10 million citizens. And so you're looking at this and thinking, wait a minute, that could very easily be used to enact some kind of a one-child policy or something crazy like that. This is not simply about keeping people from flowing into Switzerland and becoming new citizens, apparently, when you put a number on it like that. It didn't pass. But it was interesting to me that there was one picture that showed the signs for and against. It was in German, and, one of them is like, we have to protect Switzerland for the Swiss or something. It says, vote ja, J-A, yes. And the other one says, vote nein. And what it has is, at a time like this, we don't need to be doing something like this bill. And it shows a picture of Donald Trump. He was the poster child for the people who, again, he's made this issue of open borders his, but he's not really doing anything here in America that's very effective. He is going up on the H-1B visas. He's offering gold cards to the very worst people to come here. That is the criminal billionaire class, in my opinion. But anyway, his what he has done is to undermine support for protecting borders because of the authoritarian police state tactics of Bovino and other people. And Bovino is going to run for president. Yeah, this is an idiocracy in a way that is really a criminal idiocracy. But getting back to this, the Congress considered the mandate is the fact that they have surrendered to the president all these other issues, as I said before. The fact they don't want to follow the Constitution and wage war, the fact that their primary function is the power of the purse, and that's supposed to be their primary input. They've just ignored that. Let the president set the tariff rates. And of course, we have one guy doing it. He's going to change it multiple times in a day, as we have seen Trump doing it over and over again, creating absolute economic chaos. In intelligence, Israel is more of an adversary than an ally. Being an adversary in intelligence means indulging in the hostile act of espionage. Israel has a long record of conducting that type of hostile act against the United States. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was just last week that we had the 59th anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty. And it is amazing that is the week that they decided it'd be a great idea to merge our military with Israel, to merge our intelligence agencies as well. And of course, there was a lot of backstabbing and merging that was happening at that time between Lyndon Johnson and between the Israelis. There was a lot of backstabbing that happened. As a matter of fact, one person pointed out, John McCain, his father was a Zionist traitor, just like his son. He allowed Israel to attack the U.S. Navy ship, the USS Liberty, resulting in 34 dead. That's more than we've lost in the Iran War. And 171 wounded American Navy men. The traitorous, slimy guy then helped to cover up the whole incident for his Jewish masters. And I think that's a pretty accurate summation of all of that. And when you look at the USS Liberty, to criticize Israel for attacking our own ships repeatedly, with a large flag flying, repeatedly attacking it. And, what was it that John McCain did? They pulled back the help that was going to come from the Americans. They told them to come back. So that's why they were betrayed by their own country as well as by Israel. And it was a merger between these two countries that did the USS Liberty. And so it's very fitting that 59 years later, they would introduce these types of bills.
The USS Liberty incident is very frequently used by anti-Semites to suggest that Israel
pull the race card,
American ships and then pays no penalty.
Israel murdered 34 of my shipmates in cold blood. They wounded 174 others, including myself, and almost sunk our ship in a constant barrage of nothing but hell on earth.
And there have been multiple naval investigations of the USS Liberty incident.
It says there's been 5 official investigations into the USS Liberty. There's never been one. They're all liars. When you write Congress, be prepared to be lied to. In fact, I called my Congress senator, but guess what? They're all taking money from AIPAC. AIPAC has got them under the thumb.
There was a case of mistaken identity wherein USS Liberty was in the Mediterranean in a place they were not supposed to be. Israel thought that it was an Egyptian ship and shot it.
The USS Liberty was never a mistaken identity. It was a pre-planned, murderous, savage attack on innocent Americans doing their job for their country, and our country put a knife on our back and paid them billions for it, for murdering American sailors and Marines on the high seas. They got billions, and they're still getting billions from the United States of America because of it.
You're not going to get an honest investigation of the USS Liberty any more than you're going to get an honest investigation in a COVID inquiry. These government people are all on the payroll of pharmaceutical companies, on the payroll of the Israeli government. They're just a bunch of prostitutes, traitors, criminals, graft, corruption, betrayal. That's what's coming out of Congress right now. As a matter of fact, don't listen to Ben Shapiro. You might want to listen to Haaretz. So, but sir, it's an American ship. Never mind, hit her. When Israel attacked the USS Liberty, that's their headline. The Americans have findings that show our pilots were aware the ship was American. Of course they were. They had a gigantic American flag on it. And newly published documents by the state archives. So again, Ben Shapiro is just lying to you. I thought it's interesting. Now, I don't know if you're watching that or not, but I watched that again this morning closely. And if you look at Ben Shapiro, when he's saying that stuff, he's always looking up and to the side, which is a tell for many people that they're lying. Have you ever noticed that? When somebody is not able to look you in the eye, but they're constantly looking up as they're talking, you know, like, oh, let me think. They're kind of making it up as they go along. They're trying to read the script to lie to you. Well, Thomas Massey did talk about the USS Liberty, and he did talk to sailors last week. He held a press conference on the day of, and a lot of them were talking about the fact that they were threatened by the U.S. government not to say anything about it. The U.S. government was threatening them. That's what it looks like, folks, when your government is owned by a foreign government that puts your interests far below their own. That's what it looks like when you merge the U.S. with Israel.
On the next day, on June 8th, they started the day. The visibility was unlimited. The American flag was flying proudly on the USS Liberty. More planes came from Israel to surveil the boat, the ship. And they thought they were in good shape, but what happened next surprised them all. French Mirage jets showed up and for 25 minutes strafed and attacked the USS Liberty. They shot rockets. They shot 30-millimeter cannons into the hull and into the ship. They even dropped napalm on the bridge of the ship. This was an effort to kill everybody on board. There was no intention of taking prisoners. After the 25 grueling minutes of attack on this virtually unarmed ship, and they thought things were over and they could recover, the torpedo boats showed up, 3 torpedo boats. They launched 4 torpedoes. One of them hit the hull of the USS Liberty and killed 25 people instantly. It blew a 40-foot by 40-foot hole in the side of this ship. They were intent on sinking it. But they were also intent on not having a single survivor. According to eyewitness accounts, the Israelis machine gunned the lifeboats that they put down. They machine gunned the firefighters who were on the deck. They were bringing the wounded and the dead to the mess hall to triage them. They had one doctor who was trying to help them all, put a few stitches in. It was harrowing, and it's amazing. If not for that crew, that boat would have sunk that day. But it still wasn't over. Helicopters showed up, combat helicopters. And the USS Liberty, even though their signals were being jammed by the Israelis, got a signal out. And there were ships that tried to respond. The USS Saratoga, the USS America sent planes. Both of them sent planes to help the USS Liberty. And something happened that's never happened before. A ship under attack, the planes were recalled.
John McCain's
Never
dad
happened before.
did that.
And they sat there for 17 hours. 34 dead, 174 wounded, out of 294 crew members. That's over 70% casualty rate, unheard of. The Israelis were intent on leaving no survivor. And what about our own military? Why did they not send anybody for 17 hours to help these men? So what really happened? You know, the official reports say that it was a case of mistaken identity. But if you listen to Dean Rusk, former Secretary of State, Richard Helms, CIA Director, Bobby Ray Inman, head of the NSA, Captain Ward Boston, who was the chief counsel of the Court of Inquiry. If you listen to Admiral Moore, who served in Pearl Harbor, Midway, commanded both the Atlantic and Pacific Fleet, and was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, none of these distinguished men think this was an accident. They think it was intentional murder by the country of Israel, either as a false flag operation or because they simply didn't want anybody observing what they were doing that day. Well, I've got a call to action for everybody here. Honor these individuals. Quit ignoring that they exist. Go to their website, ussliberty.org. Support them. And while they're still alive, they need closure. Let's give them closure. Let's have an investigation. Let's pass a resolution honoring them. It's long overdue. And then they can have their justice. With that, I yield back. And I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a declaration of Ward Boston declaring that the only official court of inquiry was invalid.
Well, again, will there be an investigation? Of course not. Just like there'll be no investigation of COVID. Instead, on the 59th anniversary of this happening, you have the U.S. and Israel moving to, the U.S. is moving to formally surrender themselves to the Israeli military. We're going to bring them in militarily, merge with them. We're going to give them all of our intelligence. They will give us no intelligence, as a matter of fact. And so this is the response they have. What?
Even calling it a merger is very disingenuous when they aren't giving us any intelligence. We're giving it to them. They aren't giving us any money. We're giving it to them. It's a subordination of the U.S. military.
That's right. Called a hostile takeover. That's what you do with corporations when one corporation buys out another and they don't want to be taken over. Except these people who are elected representatives do want to be taken over. But it's the stockholders that don't want it there. The taxpayers who are there, they do not want this merger. But again, there will be no investigation, just like there's no investigation of COVID. And instead, they're going to move deeper into this, just like with COVID. You just had RFK Jr.'s health fraud institution he's over. So HHS, they're just moving to authorize the COVID vaccines for a much larger group of people. They're not investigating it. They're not warning people. They're not pulling it off the market. They're not coming after Big Pharma. Instead, they're going to give Big Pharma more of this stuff. That's what we see from Washington. No investigation, no justice, just doubling and tripling down on the crimes that they've been doing. Well, one person pointed out after Massey said that, I'm glad that Israel spent $32 million to stop Massey. That should stop the conspiracy theory that Jews control our government. And they're bragging about the fact that they took him out. Phil Turney had more to say about the USS Liberty. That's the guy who was the veteran that you saw.
We were deliberately sent there. All the ships were going one way. We were the only ones going that way. Eshkol and LBJ and their cronies together had a tight-fisted group that said, let's get this going. This attack was probably planned a year in advance to sink that ship and blame it on the Arab states.
And of course, it was the Arab oil embargo that came after that 1973 war that was on the basis of the fact that we were aiding Israel. Jonathan Pollard is the one who said, well, they didn't want to give us any money. Henry Kissinger didn't want to give us any money. As bad as Henry Kissinger was, Jonathan Pollard brags about the fact that Israel blackmailed the United States with nuclear weapons. Said, you give us the weapons that we want, or we're going to use our non-conventional weapons, wink, wink, on Egypt. And we're going to start a regional nuclear war. Well, Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger said of Jonathan Pollard that it was, quote, difficult to conceive of a greater harm to national security than that caused by the defendant in view of the breadth, the critical importance to the U.S., and the high sensitivity of the information that he sold to Israel. Again, I say that Tom Cotton is a traitor to America. He is a traitor worse than Jonathan Pollard because he's doing it openly. He's not sneaking around doing it quietly. He's openly betraying this country, Tom Cotton. There is no secret drop of money required. No, you got AIPAC for that. They don't have to register as a foreign agent. So when Pollard completed his sentence and got his parole in 2023, he was given a hero's welcome by none other than Netanyahu. I've shown you that video before. And flown in by Miriam Adelson, the person who bought Trump, famously. Now, there was nothing noble in Pollard's actions, although he liked to say he was motivated by his concern about Israel. He had offered to sell U.S. secrets to 3 other countries. And he made the same offer to a 4th country, even when spying for Israel. And it wasn't just Jonathan Pollard. Once Israel got that information, they used that information in order to, they gave military information that could betray soldiers just like they were betrayed at the USS Liberty. That's what it's going to look like with Israel in control of our military and our intelligence agencies. It's going to be one USS Liberty after the other. And so what they did was they gave that those secrets to the Soviet Union.
And of course,
in exchange for them easing the restrictions on Jews leaving Russia to go to Israel. Yes.
It'll be one U.S. Liberty after the other, but you won't hear about it because it'll be illegal to talk about it.
That's right. Because you talk about it be racist. And you think about it, there is a certain truth to that. Since the Israeli government is a racist regime, then if you criticize this racist regime, then you are talking about race. Except they're the ones who are racist, like that guy's headline last week that I talked about, that was in Jerusalem Post, I think it was. And he said to hate one ethnic group is racism, but to say that Jews are not superior to everybody else is racism. That was his take. That was his headline. The Israeli espionage threat to the U.S. has only intensified. Last week, as we talked about, the Defense Intelligence Agency raised the threat level for such espionage. The New York Times quotes an official saying that Israeli intelligence operations aimed at senior U.S. officials during the second Trump administration have become so aggressive as to be unhinged. And why would they do that? Because, I mean, they already own Trump. They own people like Tom Cotton and people like Mike Johnson and so forth. They bought these guys lock, stock, and barrel. Why would they feel the need to supply? And again, it's just like anything else. When you look at these billionaires, why do they need to have more money? Well, because it's a drug, an addiction, right? When you get a lot of money, you want more. And when you get a lot of power, you want more with that as well. So it is this insatiable power that their thirst for power that they're trying to feed here. Any sensitive information, including intelligence secrets, shared with Israel entails a high risk of Israel passing it on to other countries. And they've got a long record of doing that, as they did with Jonathan Pollard and so forth. The risk of Israel passing sensitive U.S. information to other states with any country that is willing to have such relations despite Israel's continued subjugation of the Palestinians. So they become such international pariahs that if anybody, looks at them twice, it's like, hey, let's be friends. And so China is one such state. China doesn't care about human rights. They don't care about genocide. They would do that themselves and have. And
let's not forget that a lot of the secrets that Jonathan Pollard gave to Israel, they just sold right on to Russia.
That's right. And what they're saying here is that U.S. intelligence secrets that Israel have been passed on to China. A lot of military technology has been passed on to China, and they continue to have extensive technical cooperation with China and with Russia, because China and Russia don't care about human rights. And so, hey, if we can establish we have so few countries that like us. Let me give you something. You'll like us even more. Israel has started more wars, attacked more nations than any other country in the Middle East. It uses violence, and probably in the world, if you exclude the U.S. Probably the U.S. and Israel have attacked more countries and nations than any other. It uses violence to seek regional hegemony and to destroy Palestinian nationhood in ways that are inconsistent with U.S. interests, because we don't have principles anymore, right? We only have interests. The current war with Iran demonstrates a sharp divergence between the U.S. and Israeli interests. Netanyahu's government has been sabotaging efforts to end this war. And the latest example of this is that on Sunday, as Trump is trying to finalize the deal he thinks he's got with Iran, and it appears that maybe this time it's gone through. Pakistan has said it has, and the Iranian Foreign Ministry has said it has, in addition to Trump always boasting about ending it. So something may happen, but it's not. It's just the beginning of a process. They may get the strait open, and they may have some things that start to happen this week. All that would be positive to push that back, but it's not a given yet. But as all that was happening, what Netanyahu did was to bomb Beirut and to expand the attack on Lebanon, which is tied to this. So again, he is trying deliberately to keep the peace talks from happening. That is not in our interest. It's not even in his interest, as a matter of fact. The Israelis believe that what Netanyahu has done has been counterproductive for their own security. And of course it has. If you act like a terrorist nation, what you're doing is you're feeding the terrorists. Attacks that sabotage diplomacy are among the Israeli operations that might use shared U.S. intelligence. The U.S. will also be blamed for aiding other violent Israeli operations because of the enhanced intelligence sharing, even if it no longer is paying for Israeli arms. So in other words, we're going to be tied to this bloodthirsty regime that has been involved in state terrorism, and by that I mean attacking civilian populations, attacking preemptively, aggressively, starting wars, not fighting wars of defense. And so we're going to be tied in with them. And what is going to happen with that? You know, I've seen picture after picture of people weeping over their dead children who've been blown apart. And they are going to, the wrath that America and Israel has been storing up is going to come back to us. These chickens are going to come home to roost in the form of terrorism. And of course, because of the kind of intelligence agencies that we have, if these people don't or can't engage in terrorism, they'll do it themselves and blame it on them. And it'll be perfectly plausible as a false flag attack, because everybody will understand what we have done and what we have been a partner in doing. The supposed escape clause in Section 622 of the Intelligence Bill would be so cumbersome as to be useless. The required report to Congress would dump the issue on Capitol Hill, where the Israeli lobby would quickly depict it as a question of being for or against the security of Israel. And again, let me just repeat, there is no reciprocal sharing requirement being put together from Israel. This is strictly a one-way street. Does our billions in subsidy here buy their loyalty? Well, exactly the opposite. Rather than being appreciative of $300 billion, they have betrayed us time and again. They have drawn us into their conflicts. And they have used that money to bribe our own politicians and to turn our own politicians into Benedict Arnolds. That's what Tom Cotton is. That's what the GOP has become. There is no bill in the Israeli Knesset that would mandate intelligence sharing with the U.S. None whatsoever. It's a one-way street. Audi, Modern Retro Radio, thank you very much. That's very generous. I appreciate that. It says, hi, David, Travis, and Lance. The most recent episode of my podcast, Everything is a Lie, Damn It, is a great conversation with our own Jason Barker with Knights of the Storm. Yes. Thanks for doing what you do and how you do it. Well, absolutely, folks. Check that out. I didn't know that. I'll have to watch that. I'd be interested in seeing the interaction between Audi and Jason. And again, that's on Everything is a Lie, Damn It, his podcast. Max Alva says, Mike Judge was way ahead of his time. Do not obey predictive programming. Yeah, well, absolutely. Audi Modern Retro Radio says, eventually IDF soldiers will be on U.S. soil locking up people for exercising their First Amendment rights if we let them. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's a good point, Audi, because they attacked the USS Liberty 59 years ago, but the Zionists have been doing everything they can to torpedo our personal liberty here in America, of all Americans. And they are adamantly opposed to free speech. As many people say, the first casualty of war is the truth, because governments want to lie to you during wars. And their response in all of this has been to attack and repeatedly say that the First Amendment has to be modified in order to save it. Right? That's like somebody saying, well, you got to infringe on the Second Amendment in order to protect the Second Amendment. Well, if you infringe on it, you have violated it. And free speech is either absolute or it doesn't exist. And so what we have seen over and over again from Zionist legislators whose real loyalty lies to Israel, people like Randy Fine, and then, of course, people like Tom Cotton, many of them in the Trump administration, calling for penalties for people, including criminal penalties and jail, if you criticize a foreign state. You had Carrie Prejean Bowler was kicked off of Trump's Religious Liberty Commission because he's not about religious liberty. That whole thing is a lie. He and the Republicans running it, people like Dan Patrick in Texas, the lieutenant governor there, when she said, well, wait a minute, you're saying that if we criticize a foreign government, that is anti-Semitism, and that's not going to be allowed? Well, first of all, anti-Semitism isn't even something that should reflect on religion, but yes, they tied that in, and because she even asked that question. So is Israel a religion, or is it a foreign government? And she asked that question, they kick her off. We're not allowed to have free speech. We're not allowed to have religious liberty, because those two things are in the First Amendment, tied right together at the top, as well as protesting your government, especially protesting a foreign government. None of that is going to be allowed. So we have a religious heresy that is the basis for this political movement called Zionism. And you can't criticize the product of that political movement, the state of Israel. And I guess we're going to get to the point where you can't criticize that Christian heresy that is the root of it either. So we have Patriot Girl. This is a spiritual war. It always is. And that's what I said about Pete Hegseth. He is absolutely caught up in thinking that because David was fighting in a real war for a nation that was a picture of God's heavenly kingdom, it wasn't the real thing. It was a type of the real thing. But by the time we get to the New Testament, you should understand, if you read the New Testament, if you actually read Galatians, read Hebrews, read Revelations, you understand that Revelation is really not about the state of Israel. The subtitle is the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's not about revelations about what's going to happen to Israel at the end of time or the end of the world. It's not about that. That's the way it's used by the people who twist it. It's a revelation of Jesus Christ, and the Old Testament was a revelation about the Lord Jesus Christ as well. It told us, it was a picture of his work, it was a picture of his relationship with his chosen people, the church, not Israel. And these people who are twisting this theology are doing a disservice both to Christians and to Jewish people who say that they're Jews, but they're not following the Jewish religion that was delivered to them at all. And so it is a spiritual war. When Pete Hegseth talks about the fact that he boasts about the fact that he's killing people illegally, unethically, and doing it because he's a Christian, it's just beyond belief. That's why I said, it is, he talks about, God who has prepared my hands for warfare and my fingers for battle. Well, for us today, it is about spiritual warfare. Made very, very clear in the New Testament. Jesus said over and over again, my kingdom is not of this world. If you tear this temple down, I'll rebuild it in 3 days. It was all a picture of Christ. The temple and all the rest of it was a picture of his work. The state of Israel is not your redeemer. The state of Israel did not die for our redemption, never will. And it was not blameless, that's for sure. So the prophecies in Isaiah, my servant, that is not about the state of Israel. There were prophecies there about the state of Israel and criticisms of the state of Israel. I guess Isaiah was anti-Semitic, but most of the prophets were because they were human and they had a lot of failings, just as we all do, and they were called out for it. And many of them were executed for being honest about it. But that is not where we live today. It's made very, very clear. If you ever read the New Testament, Pete should try reading it sometime. Anyway, Solo Cat, 1980. Thank you. Nacho. Not a chance Hormuz opens. We'll see. Audi, Modern Retro Radio, says Israel wanted the U.S. to think that Egypt did USS Liberty. Yeah, well, they wanted, that's what the people there on Liberty think it was. They thought it was set up as a false flag to try to draw the United States into that conflict, because that's what this merger of intelligence and military is going to do over and over again. It's going to draw us into their wars over and over and over again. And even if we don't get drawn into it, people will see us rightfully as complicit in it. Mark Young, 12, says, false Christian teachers have brainwashed their flock into thinking that support of Israel is patriotic. They have brainwashed their flock into thinking that support of Israel is Christian as well. Most of the, when you look at most of the prophecies in the Old Testament, they're not about the nation of Israel. They are kingdom prophecies. And they're prophecies about a spiritual kingdom, of which the old Israeli kingdom was a picture, a type. Audi says, I feel sorry for anyone who enlists in the U.S. military. That's right. They're going to get the USS Liberty treatment. He said they're going to be perpetual human targets for the greater Israel agenda. I absolutely agree. I would not recommend to anybody to get into the military at this point. I mean, look at the utter contempt they had for people with the vaccine mandates, and that's just one example of it. You look at what so many of them are already complaining about the fact that they're being told to execute people who have not had due process, to execute people who are shipwrecked and in the water. They're going to have to live with that the rest of their life, and that's going to gnaw on them. It's bad enough when you go to war and you have to kill somebody, let's say in self-defense, or you kill them in a righteous cause because we were the ones who were attacked and you're trying to stop the war. You can rationalize that, but you're still going to have a difficult time living with that. But if you go out as a hired gun for some criminal like Trump or Lindsey Graham, and you murder somebody, you're going to have to live with that the rest of your life. And that's going to be a difficult thing. Already they're having issues with that. I'm surprised that it's taken this long for these reports to surface. People are saying, I don't want to be involved in a situation where I'm blowing boats out of the water. We don't even know if they've got drugs on them. And that's not what we've always done anyway. At the same time they're doing that down there, they are still interdicting drugs under a very strict protocol of making sure that they check the boats. And as Rand Paul pointed out, 25% of them don't have any drugs on them. But the other issue is that even if they did, it's not a capital offense. And as many people pointed out, most of those that are interdicted, and they catch drugs, they take the drugs, they destroy the drugs, but they don't even bother to prosecute these people. And yet Trump will murder them on sight. I'm disgusted with this administration. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Hear news now at apsradionews.com or get the APS Radio app and never miss another story.
So what is going on with this Iran deal? Both sides have said that there is a deal. But of course, the devil is always in the details, isn't it? And when you look at this, I mean, Trump has cried wolf so many times, it's just a sheep. Because he's not warning people about something. He's telling people that there is a harmless thing coming. We've got peace that's coming. So I guess he's crying, sheep, sheep. He's said this so many times that we can be forgiven for being skeptical, I think. I think it's been 38 or 39 times, and the war has been going on for 100 days. That's about once every 3 days. He's been saying a deal is close on average. And so there was a limited deal that was discussed on Sunday, even as Israel stepped up their attacks on civilians in Lebanon. The deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete, said Trump in a post. And in a statement, he said they'd finalized a memorandum of understanding. Again, a memorandum of understanding. This is, it's not an end to it all, but we'll take a look at what the understanding is really about. And we'll have to wait a few days to see if there was any kind of misunderstanding. But when I looked at X, it was like a cabinet meeting transcript. It was one cabinet member after the other. We're talking about Secretary of Treasury Bessent or the Interior Burgum or J.D. Vance or you name it. Every single one of them was just praising Trump effusively. Oh, look at this. He opened up the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, big applause for that. He was the guy who closed it. He closed it with the war.
Isn't this the amazing deal from Trump, the master of deals? We're almost back to where we were before he started.
Yeah. I look at other people like Eric Daugherty or Benny Johnson, these people who are such groveling sycophants. They are just chomping at the bit to see what they can praise Trump for any little thing. Oh, look, he tied his shoelaces today. Isn't that amazing? No other president's ever been able to tie his shoelaces like Donald Trump. Like, wow, that's what we're seeing out there in social media. And so he settles for a truce of convenience with Iran. And that's the way it was described by one commentator. About a week into the war against Iran, Trump pledged that there would be no deal except for unconditional surrender. Except that there's a lot of conditions in this. So many conditions, everybody's wondering if it's really going to follow through on this. And we'll take a look at what those conditions are, whether or not it is a win. So 100 days later, Trump is hailing a deal that underlies not only the Islamic Republic's capacity to withstand American and Israeli bombings, but also its newfound leverage from severely disrupting energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump is celebrating this as if he liberated the Strait of Hormuz by doing this. Well, the reality is that the clear winner of all this is really Iran, if you look at it, because Trump's been playing ego politics, they've been playing geopolitics. And everybody that looks at this honestly, and that is even the majority of Israelis who are not for peace, they look at this as an incomplete war, as a lost war, as a war that has empowered Iran. They're not happy with this in Israel, the vast majority of the public, about 2/3 of them. Dan Shapiro, a former senior U.S. official, said it largely attempts to reopen the strait, which had definitely become the most important issue. But that just demonstrates how much leverage Iran had to persuade Trump that it was better to end this war, even on weak terms, than to continue it. If the U.S. escalated strikes as Trump had threatened, the Islamic regime that is battered but not defeated would retaliate against America's allies in the Gulf and further exacerbate the energy crisis. If the status quo remained, the global economy would be hit harder. When you look at the massive amount of ammunition and arms and missiles and the massive cost that we incurred to destroy stuff in Iran, the fact that they're still able to launch missile and drone strikes, and by the way, this agreement doesn't even mention any of that. But as many times as, we got rid of their Navy. Yeah, we got all 7 boats sunk. And yet nothing is said about the thousands or tens of thousands of drones that they have. And there's nothing in this agreement about that either. And so if they can close the Strait of Hormuz, if they can continue to make retaliatory attacks, if their infrastructure is attacked, they can destroy all of the Gulf states. And then the entire world is in for a really rough time for quite a while if they were to do that. So Trump doesn't really have any cards. As he likes to say, I've got all the cards. No, you don't. They've got all the cards in this particular one. You are in a lose-lose situation. We were in a lose-lose dynamic, said Ali Vayez at a crisis group think tank. He said if they'd continue with the war, the alternative would be worse for both sides. The Memorandum of Understanding will extend a fragile ceasefire, which is agreed to on April the 8th, extend it by 60 days. Iran will gradually reopen the strait while clearing the mines without charging fees for shipping during the duration of that period. It doesn't say they won't charge in the future. It extends the ceasefire, it reopens the strait, it lays the foundation for nuclear talks, right? So that's to be negotiated, TBN instead of TBD, with less pressure on Iran. The biggest mistake is for people to think that this is the final deal, said one diplomat who had looked at it. Trump has repeatedly insisted that Iran give up its nuclear dust, quote unquote. But crunch time is on the nuclear program will only begin in earnest once the Memorandum of Understanding has been formally signed on Friday. In a war with few coherent U.S. objectives, one constant from Trump was his insistence that Iran would never have the capacity to develop nuclear weapons. Well, according to Bibi, they've been 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon now for 30 years. This is just amazing to me that they would use this as a justification when we have been lied to by this liar who started this whole thing for 30 plus years. We all know that it's not about nuclear bombs from Iran. We all know that it's his obsession to destroy Iran for the Greater Israel Project. That was the basis of all these lies about the bomb it just being 2 weeks away. The Memo of Understanding is not expected to address Iran's missile and drone arsenal or its support for regional proxies. Again, they come out of this stronger geopolitically. The regime has not changed. He killed the father. The son has taken it over. The son is more hardlined. All of them are now more hardlined. And any internal pushback that was happening by the people living under this, and it is a very repressive regime, make no doubt about it. People who were critical of the government, just like under the Shah, government critics would be lined up, tortured, and executed. And same thing was happening under the Ayatollahs that happened under the Shah. And so by attacking them and attacking civilians, you've actually strengthened this regime, which has now become more hardline. So they warned Trump against going to war. Many Arab states did. And they have supported efforts to try to end the conflict as soon as possible. Because what they have wound it up with is a wounded, more hawkish regime right in their backyard. Yeah, this is a much more dangerous animal thanks to the actions of Bibi and Trump. Arab states will also be wary about whether Iran will attempt to charge fees for ships using the strait, something that Tehran has been insisting that it plans to do. So we're going to kick this down the road, and there's a way for Trump to try to save face and try to get out of there and, again, quickly open up the Strait of Hormuz, because we are looking at tank bottoms in terms of Western oil reserves. Some analysts question whether the deal will even make it to the next phase, citing Trump's plan to end the Israeli-Hamas war in Gaza. He announced with great fanfare last October that he was about to do that. Never happened, right? So again, you can take Trump's statements, whether it's about tariffs or whether it's about war or peace, you can take that with a grain of salt, because the guy is just LOL. He's not only a joke LOL, but he is also lie on lie. Lies stacked on top of other lies. Everything he does is a lie. The deal also calls for an immediate permanent end to the war on various fronts, including Lebanon. So we'll see if Netanyahu will do what he can to sabotage that. Israeli officials have made it clear they intend to continue striking perceived threats in Lebanon and anywhere else, they said. So the U.S.-Iran agreement would have to, would basically, if it works, said one diplomat, it will stop the bleeding, but it is not going to heal the wound. That's right, because we have a Hatfield and McCoy's situation that is there, but it's worse than that.
Well, if it's all dependent on Israel not attacking their neighbors, then there is no peace deal.
That's right, because one side has this project where they think they've got a mandate from God, and it's the only one that they care about, right? God gave them a lot of mandates. He gave all of us some mandates, but they only care about one of those, and that's the part where they think they've got a deed to the land. They were tenants. As a matter of fact, if you look at even Jesus' parables, he refers to the Jews as tenants on the Father's land. And what they did was they killed the people who came to oversee what they were doing, and God kicked them off the land, which was not theirs. They had a right of tenants, not a ownership right to that. Oil executives are sounding the alarm over the dwindling stockpiles. They said, without an influx of more oil, of course, prices will have to surge to stop the run on supplies. And it's not going to be that easy to get this started, I don't think. Because unlike the situation you had with the OPEC oil embargo, this abrupt stopping of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which was a bigger disruption in terms of quantity. Again, the 1973 OPEC oil embargo was directed only at the United States, and that only affected 15% of our oil consumption. Yet, it created a global crisis in terms of the price of oil. So these oil executives are sounding the alarm, and I think it's because they know the prices are going to go up continually for a while because of the shrinking supplies. And they're going to be charged with price gouging. And what they're saying is, look, these are depleted oil inventories that are keeping prices elevated, and it's a supply and demand situation. Whether that's true or not, it will be demagogued by people. Certainly, this time around, it won't just be the Democrats who are saying that they are price fixing. It'll be the Republicans as well, because they want Trump to look good. For more than 15 weeks, the U.S. and other countries around the world have had to dip deep into their oil supplies, into salt caverns, into oil tanks, into strategic reserves to make up for the millions of barrels of oil trapped behind the strait. Stocks are nearing critical levels, and energy executives say that without an influx of more oil, prices will have to surge to stop the run on supplies. And they said this after this memorandum of understanding was agreed to. And so you can always have either rationing by government or you can have rationing by the global marketplace. Richard Nixon's preference was to do it by government, have wage and price controls, to do a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and other things like that. We talk about 47 years. They love to talk about that because it's been 47 years since the Ayatollahs took charge, since they threw out the Shah and took over the embassy. And that's where most Americans first found Iran on the map. Well, probably still couldn't find it on the map, but that's where it first entered their consciousness. But it's been 73 years since we threw out their elected president and installed a king. That's what Shah means in Persian. But it's been 53 is the last time we had an oil embargo. And that's the other number that they don't want to talk about. It's been 53 years since an oil embargo, and that oil embargo was for Israel's benefit as well. Half of Israelis, meanwhile, agree that deterrence has been weakened following the wars with Iran and Lebanon. They're raising doubts about Netanyahu's government and his military's ability to provide security after the failures of what's happened in Iran and in Lebanon. 50% of Israelis believe their country's deterrence has declined, compared with 28% who say that it has strengthened. So in other words, it's about 2 to 1. The people who said we're worse off in terms of security than we were before. They understand that Iran has been strengthened geopolitically. and militarily. They've shown a resolve and an ability to continue on even after an attempted decapitation strike. And they've shown the ability to not only close the Strait of Hormuz, but to punish the other Gulf states if their infrastructure is attacked. So sending ground troops into Lebanese territory, at least 30 Israeli soldiers have been killed, 1,302 injured, primarily by Hezbollah's newly introduced FPV drones. What are FPV drones? First-person view. In other words, it's got a camera on it that is sending a feedback to the operator, so it's like he's on board. And it's a way of doing a kamikaze thing. It's like a video game now to pull these things in. That's what's that's what's happening with this asymmetric warfare. You have paramilitary groups like Hezbollah that were formed in response to Israel's prior invasion, but it doesn't take much to stop the state-of-the-art militaries. They have an edge in terms of dropping bombs on civilians, but all that does is galvanize that country against the attacker.
And that's one of the reasons why they're trying to shut down 3D printers in the U.S. and Western countries.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, I got an article about that where this company is putting together really not even 3D printing, but they're doing it mass producing. And so they're using the same technology that is used for styrofoam beer coolers. They call them flying beer coolers. They lean into that because that emphasizes just how cheap and how quickly this can be formed, because they're doing it mass producing in a mold. And they're creating not just the helicopter drones, which use a lot more fuel, but they have winged drones that are suicide. And they can have a much longer range than the helicopter ones. So on Sunday, Netanyahu decided to launch an attack on Iran, despite, or I would say because of Trump's supposed requirement not to do so, because he doesn't want to have peace. In an interview with the Financial Times, Trump said, "I call the shots. I call all the shots. Netanyahu doesn't call the shots." Again, he lies over and over again, and we immediately see that he was lying. Netanyahu ordered a strike on Iran just hours later. So I guess that shows who calls the shots. According to polls, Israelis are divided on their opinion of Netanyahu's decision to ignore Trump and to order the bombing. About 29% said he acted correctly. 36% said a stronger strike should have been done. So think about that. If you think that this is just a problem with Netanyahu, understand that when you put those two together, you got 67% of Israelis want the same or more, right, in terms of war. 62% expressed distrust in Trump. He's not obedient enough, right? So Netanyahu is not warlike enough, and Trump is not obedient enough, according to the Israeli people in a large poll.
Trump keeps on making all these claims of not obeying Netanyahu. Of course, Netanyahu uses actions rather than words, which speak a lot louder.
That's right. 21% say they trust Trump regarding Israeli interests. So that's only a fifth trust Trump. A majority of Israelis believe the state has failed to secure victory in any war since October 2023. Well, that's when they started the Gaza thing. They realized that Gaza was really a strategic defeat for them, even if it was a tactical victory. It was a Pyrrhic victory. They may have reduced the area to rubble, but just a reminder, we did the same thing to North Korea. As I pointed out before, the futility of just massive carpet bombing of civilians. That does not win wars. What wins wars is targeted bombing of the other people's military facilities. That's what Iran was doing in this war for the most part. And yet, nobody follows that advice. We did massive carpet bombing of the civilian population. We basically reduced North Korea to rubble. And because they got wound up with an authoritarian communist government, they never rebuilt from that rubble. But they did create a police state to keep everybody in line. 57% of respondents in this Israeli poll said no victory had been achieved. So again, they're looking at this and saying, what are we getting out of this? They want the greater Israel project. They want to take over their neighbors, but they don't see that happening. It has been a failure. a defeat. Again, the finding came after more than 2 years of Israel's genocide, multiple offensive military campaigns against Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, alongside attacks in Yemen and Syria, and a campaign of destruction and displacement in the West Bank. Again, it is just, when you look at the Israeli government's policy, it is just pure evil, continuously. No question about it. On Thursday, Trump had warned in the coming hours the U.S. will hit Iran very hard and take total control of Tehran's oil. And then that night, he reverses course and claims that a deal with Iran is expected to be finalized soon. So again, when we look at this, except for the fact that that Iran has also said that there may be, that they think they've got a memorandum of understanding, Trump has been lying about this stuff from the inception. So he said to Netanyahu, let's not blow it, he said on social media. He said this morning's attack on Beirut should not have happened, particularly on a special day when we're so close to a peace deal with Iran. It's my birthday. Come on, can't you do something nice for me? The attack he was responding to was very small, he said, and meaningless. Nobody was hurt, injured, or killed, and should not disrupt this important process. So what had happened was a drone strike on northern Israel set off a chain reaction. On Sunday, Israel hit Hezbollah targets in Beirut in retaliation, and Iran is now threatening to strike back. So again, Netanyahu may be able to subvert this whole process. A similar strike last week led to Iran launching missiles at Israel, and a day of escalation between the two countries. So Netanyahu is hoping that'll happen again. Now, Mike Waltz, who is the U.S. ambassador to the UN, said that this agreement is very different from the Obama deal. He said there's two fundamental changes. So let's take a look at that, if that's really the case. He said under the Obama deal, there was not anytime, anywhere verification. He said, and number two, you're not going to see these pallets of cash moving up front. It's going to be pay by performance. So we're still going to pay them. It's just that you're not going to have pallets of cash in foreign currency because it was prohibited to give that money to them by Congress. So they went around it in the Obama administration by putting together massive pallets of foreign currency and shipping money to them. And so he says, so we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to give them $25 billion of assets that we had frozen as a reward. Yeah, big difference, isn't it? And of course, there was a regime of inspections. I'm not sure how that is. He claims it's different under this one. But under the old agreement, the IAEA was inspecting their facilities. And so maybe it was a regularly scheduled thing rather than something that you can do on the spur of the moment. But just exactly how fast are you able to pull that off? You think you're going to go in there and surprise them? Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, right? I don't think it's going to be like that at all. It's still not going to be much difference in terms of that. And then he said, and finally, the blockade, Trump's blockade, has been enormously effective. Do you see what he did there? See that spin there? He says, oh, so now this is Trump's blockade. It's like, you didn't fire me, I quit, right? So they closed the Strait of Hormuz. Then Mark Levin takes credit for telling Trump, you need to put your own blockade there so that you can say that you did it instead of them doing it. And then that puts you in a position where you can say, now I'm pulling that off and I opened up the strait. That is nothing other than a lie and a spin. And of course, who better to lie and spin than Mark Levin? He's had more practice at that than pretty much anybody. Been doing it for many, many years. He says, Trump knows how to drive a deal. Unlike his predecessors, he's got the great United States military because, Obama and Biden didn't have the U.S. military, I guess. And he's got very effective actions by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to keep a foot on the neck of regime's economy. Well, wait a minute. Biden did sanctions, and we criticized him for doing the sanctions because the sanctions against Russia were very counterproductive, frankly. What they did was it began the death knell of the petrodollar. because people realized that the U.S. could not be trusted. So we need to have a different system to transfer money. We've got to get out of SWIFT. We got to stop these sanctions. Russian money was confiscated out of banks and so forth. So what Biden did with his Treasury Secretary was to kick off the demise of the U.S. petrodollar. And of course, Trump has only doubled down on it. So there's really nothing new here, in spite of all the spin and lies from the people who work for Trump. As I read the terms of the proposed deal, whether it's true or not, my heart breaks because of the outcome of the deal will be deadly, says one person who has had a personal experience there in Iran as someone who was an enemy of the regime because she was a Christian. There are truly no good terms in the deal being reported, but as much as the terms are bad, the most deadly part of it is the deal itself, she says. She lived under the Islamic Republic, and she said, most of my last year in Iran was in Tehran's notorious Evin prison, under threat of a death penalty and being executed at any moment. My crime was for converting to Christianity. As much as they tried to force me to deny my faith, I would not bend. That is how you make a deal with the Islamicists, not by negotiating. And so again, when we look at this, let's not lose sight of the fact that just because the U.S. was in the wrong in terms of starting a war against these people, it was not a good regime. And the sad part about this is that the civilian bombing campaign that Trump and Netanyahu engaged in has only strengthened and radicalized that evil regime even more. If they wanted regime change, the best thing they could have done was to let the people let it take its course, what they had done. As nice as all this sounds, she said, that the Islamic Republic regime may commit on paper to give up all these nuclear materials and never have nuclear weapons, having lived under the regime, suffered under it, seeing my friends, my loved ones, including my husband, tortured and executed, I know that no deal they put their names to will ever be honored. But here's the difference. They have now seen that the U.S. can't be trusted. Even as the U.S. and Israel are negotiating a peace agreement with them, they sneak attack them, number one. Number two, everybody in the region now understands that the only way that they can keep from being attacked is to have nuclear weapons. You think they're going to pursue these things secretly? Of course they will. And she says, based on the character of the people there, she knows that they will. So supposedly the Hormuz Strait is going to reopen on Friday. I guess the question is, why so long, right? Why wait till Friday? Pakistan has confirmed the peace deal. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has been working as a mediator in all of this. And they report that it includes a significant release of billions in frozen assets in the West, specifically $25 billion worth of Iran's frozen assets. And when we look at how much money we have spent in this war on our own, right, in terms of just the cost of the bombs and other issues like that, as well as the planes and all the MQ-9 Reaper drones that were destroyed, it was about $17 billion in just the first couple of days. Now the estimates are over $100 billion in terms of things that we'll have to rebuy from the military-industrial complex. So the deal was confirmed by Trump just before the opening of the New York futures market. Again, is this a market manipulation? Who knows? Well, Mark Levin is urging Trump to finish off Iran. He warns theocratic leaders will never abide by any deal. Again, we're not winning here, but we are whining. We got the biggest whiner of all time, Mark Levin. Yeah.
But Netanyahu doesn't claim to be theocratic, does he? I mean, he does claim to have the land, right. But yet he's the one that will never abide by a deal.
That's right. Well, they are, and many ultra-Orthodox Jews will point out that they don't want to have anything to do with these secular Israeli leaders. But he will go back and call the people that he wants to exterminate, he'll call them Amalek. And he will, quote the Bible when it suits his needs, just like Ben Shapiro, who doesn't believe that Moses separated the Red Sea using, that God did it for Moses, but he believes that the land is his. So they're pretty pretty selective about what they believe and what they don't believe. Mark Levin urged Trump to finish the military campaign against Iran. Finish him out. Wipe out the country's theocratic regime. You know, it's like this guy ought to be. He's kind of like Donald Trump's Barney Fife, except he's a lot more dangerous than Barney Fife. History shows they will never abide by a deal, said Levin. He made his case on Saturday night, you know, when he's supposed to be observing Sabbath. So I guess he's, again, as Lance pointed out, Iran has these theocratic leaders, but these guys pretend that they're Jews, but they're not. They're not Jews ethnically, and they're not observant Jews either.
They don't practice the rest of the religion, but they do have a theocratic right to the land.
That's right, yeah. Well, as Jesus said, you know, they say they're Jews, but they're not. They're actually the synagogue of Satan. Never heard a more apt description of people like Mark Levin and Benjamin Netanyahu. Levin said, the mass murdering death cult that is the Iranian regime is not going to commit suicide. But, you know, Israel is also a mass murdering death cult, and they are committing suicide in terms of public opinion globally, whether they realize it or not. Trump later defended Levin against criticisms from people like Megyn Kelly after she said the U.S. was fighting Israel's war. He also blamed Levin and she also blamed Levin and Ben Shapiro for pushing the U.S. into attacking Iran. Of course, Trump's not just defending Levin and Israel. He's defending himself, because what people are saying is you're weak, you're corrupt, you're bought. So Trump's possible Iran deal is a costly birthday gift, said Jack Reed, a Democrat senator from Rhode Island. He said, for 100 days, we've been hearing constantly there's going to be a deal. There's going to be a deal over and over again. Again, as I said before, there's about 38 or 39 times. So it averages out to about once every 3 days on average. Trump is talking about a deal. He said the president wants to give himself a birthday present. We've paid for it with hundreds of billions of dollars. He said, as the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, he has criticized Trump's negotiations with Tehran, arguing a new deal would not vastly differ from Obama's previous nuclear deal. So we heard Mike Waltz, the UN ambassador, say, oh, that's very different. And he's saying, well, no, actually it's not. He said, we spent billions of dollars. We've lost 14 personnel killed in action. Of course, Trump doesn't mention that at all in any of his stuff. Hundreds wounded, and we've disrupted the world's economy. And we're basically less than what we had under the Obama deal that Trump walked away from in his first term. So again, let's talk about where we really stand on this. There were never any discussion. There was never any list of objectives that they wanted to achieve. He just did it, right? Because he wanted to, just like his tariffs. But one of the things that kind of emerged as a de facto talking point objective was regime change. That did not happen. He killed the father. The son is gravely wounded but recovering. And by all accounts, he has been radicalized, and especially the people who are the leaders around them. They now realize more than ever that they need to have a nuclear weapon. So did the nuclear program end? No. They actually they killed the guy who had a fatwa against developing the nuclear weapons, but they have not ended it. Instead, what they have done is given Iran and everybody else in the region a good reason for having nuclear weapons. Then what about the Strait? Well, the Strait could be unclosed, I guess we could say, instead of opened. But it was Trump's actions in the Israeli attack that closed it in the first place. So I don't know how that's a victory. And then Iran gets $25 billion as reparations, and the U.S. taxpayers get another $100 billion added to the debt to be borrowed. Just the first 12 days, again, it was $16 billion. And then estimates are well over $100 million for the 100 days that it's been going on. So I don't know how we spend that as a victory, except that Vance says, well, they're not getting any cash. We're not putting anything on a plane and send it to them. No funds are being released. The funds are being released not for simply signing a deal or attending a meeting. They have obligations. They've got to show that they're doing things before we're going to give them $25 billion. Well, You think that's a victory? I don't. Meanwhile, Doug Burgum is blaming the Democrats for the high price of gasoline, not for the Strait of Hormuz that was closed because of an initiation of aggression. And again, this is why I say it is just lie on top of lie, and it is laughable. It is LOL. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum shifted the blame around rising gas prices amid the Iran war to Democrat state officials. And of course, he's not the first one to do that. I've seen people doing this over and over again in terms of news programs where there's a debate between Republicans and Democrats. It's like, oh, you want to complain about high price of gas? Well, talk about California. They've got the highest price of gas. And it's like, you just made it higher for everybody with what you did with the Strait of Hormuz. The price of gasoline varies across the whole country right now, largely by state policy and state taxes, not by the underlying fundamentals, said Burgum. So he said, California has the highest U.S. gas averages, and that is a self-inflicted wound. If you want to get upset about the price of gas, you should get upset with Gavin Newsom, not with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, tell that to people around the world. He says this has nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz. There's just no limit to what these sycophants around Trump will say in terms of lying to your face. We all know that's not true. In California, for example, gas prices are very expensive. They're now $5.75 on average, compared to $4.65 a year ago. They were the highest a year ago. They're the highest now. And that higher cost is due to the state government. However, Newsom didn't change anything from last year when it was $4.65 to this year when it's $5.75. That's due to what Donald Trump did. And he increased it across the board for everybody in every state because of his actions and in every country. And he is pushing us toward the edge of a Great Depression. And yet nobody wants to, in the Trump administration, will admit to that. So Trump is claims that he controls the Strait of Hormuz and claims that he did it now. He says the United States of America now controls the Strait of Hormuz, not Iran. Their military is defeated and their economy is lost. Yeah, so I guess that explains why he's got to send them $25 billion. Well, comment from NMAX. He says, first term, Trump brought us warp speed toxic vaccines. This term, he's bringing warp speed AI fascism. Absolutely right. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Anglo 1999 says, Trump, I'll take $100 from you and give back $1. That's what he calls winning. Absolutely right. It's not what I call winning. We'll be right back.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
And before we get back into the news, I just want to remind you that our friends at Homestead Products /shop have got a sale on, and I'm sorry, it's not /shop, it's .shop. I misspoke there. Now on sale, we have natural and organic soap, lemon soap, cucumber soap, goat milk soap, coffee soap. I've never seen cucumber soap before. We should try that. Anyway, those are all on sale right now at homesteadproducts.shop. Check them out. They are a supporter and a friend of the show. We really do appreciate their support. And they have a great selection of inventive natural products. I got to say, they have tumbleweed for those of us who are fortunate enough to live in an area where there's rain, a lot of rain. I don't know if that's the defining factor for tumbleweed or whatever, but it's a great fire starter for your barbecues, especially for the summer. And you'll find things like that there. That's what I said. It's just really innovative and natural. It's a much better fire starter than using a lot of chemicals and things like that to get it started. So check out the supplies there at homestead.shop. We really do appreciate their support.
Homesteadproducts.shop.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep saying it the wrong way. I'm sorry. I'm getting old here. This is something that I've seen over and over again. This is, I think, perhaps the most egregious case of government stealing from its own citizens. This is in Hawaii, and the government in Hawaii, and Honolulu specifically, it's a situation for the local city government. A woman is fighting to keep her home after a $600,000 website mistake. This is a Honolulu woman, 83 years old. She's lived in her home for 56 years. She suffered some serious injuries in a car crash. And after she got out of the hospital, she found waiting for her a city fine of $600,000 that had accrued while she was recovering. They were accruing these charges at $10,000 a day. And what they did was it started out with a charge against her saying that she was short-term renting her home, which she wasn't doing. She is renting a part of her home to make ends meet, but it's not a short-term rental. Instead, what happened was one of these Airbnb or some similar website like that put her on the registry, even though she has never done it. And even though if you go to their website and try to set up a rental on her home, it doesn't allow you to do that. So basically, they listed her as being available. And we've had this situation before. Karen has, in the past, tried to book with an Airbnb that was falsely listed. And you contact the owner, you go, no, I'm not doing that. And so that's what happened to her. The rental website listed her apartment as available through them, although it wasn't actually bookable through them. And she has not ever rented that. She did not know about this, and they started collecting these excessive fines. Again, this is a violation of the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. This is what happens when you throw the Constitution out. Everything in the Bill of Rights is there for a very, very strong, valuable reason. And that's what this looks like. This is very, very horrific situation. It was done, and like I said before, I don't really think it was a mistake. I think it was done by these websites aggressively scraping information off of the web because they want to look like they've got a lot of properties that are available. So the city issued its notice of violation, but she was unable to access it because she was in the hospital, and it ballooned before she got home. She said, "It feels to me like they're just trying to take my house." Well, it feels like that because that's what they're trying to do. As I've mentioned before, I've seen the same thing happen in Tampa about 30 years ago. And it was a situation there. They had a mayor, her name was Sandy Friedman, and she was doing this over and over again to elderly people, poor people who had been in their homes for a very long time. And so the area was starting to get kind of run down, and they just wanted to go through and wipe out all these residences and hand it over to her supporters and donors who wanted to build skyscrapers there. She was eventually able to get most of that done. But the way that they would do it, one particularly egregious case that my sister got involved in, because my dad had some mortgages that he held on some of these older properties that were there. They were in areas where he had grown up. And he had passed away, and so my sister was managing it. She went down because she got a call from the people. They didn't know how to handle it. They were paying the mortgage, and they said, we got this notice they're going to take our home. And so she went down there to fight it. And the lady before my sister was up there she said, well, I got all these fines put against me because somebody left a railroad tie on the back of my property by the alley. And she said, I called the city of Tampa and asked them to remove it. And they came out and left it there and then started issuing fines to me about it. And so the judge says, well, is that on your property or not? And she said, well, and she started to answer it. And this guy who's with a homeowners association trying to protect the homeowners, not a homeowners association, but a group that's trying to protect the homeowners from these actions, jumped up and said, don't answer that. This is our, if we stopped beating your wife question and everything. So it was a racket. And Sandy Friedman, these people called her Sandlot Friedman because she wanted to just take all these people's homes and set them, knock them down, and then build skyscrapers for her friends. So anyway, officials put a lien on this woman's house, blocked her access. Listen to this. They blocked her access to basic services. Like she cannot renew her driver's license or car registration. I mean, they really got vindictive on all this stuff. It's bad enough that they would charge her $10,000 a day and run the price of this stuff up to $600,000. But now you can't even renew your driver's license or whatever. I mean, it's insane. She says, I was going to live here for the rest of my days, she said. The thought of losing it is just something I can't imagine. Yeah, these officials, these government officials, can truly be heartless. Her legal advisors are aware, of course, of the Eighth Amendment. That's their first line of attack, how unreasonable this is. They said governments can't simply impose fines that are so ruinous that they would financially devastate someone over a simple error. And that is what this is, a simple error that was done by a third party, not even by this woman. So Honolulu has issued more than $90 million in fines for related advertising violations. So if you advertise your home as available for short-term lease, they come after you, even if you weren't the one who did it, even if it was a third party. Again, you want to talk about weaponization of the government? Well, what about this?
Or more likely, it's if you have a house that they think they can get, they will come after you for any reason.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, real estate in Honolulu is very, very valuable. She's got a very old home. I imagine she's been there for 53 years, and it's probably not much of a home, but just because of the location, because of what somebody can do with it. Explosive new book on Trump sparks a White House alarm that Situation Room conservatives were taped. This is the thing I think is interesting, and this is a good example of how stupid the Trump administration is. So you've got New York Times author Maggie Halberman and another individual have written a book dishing dirt about what was happening in the Trump White House over Jeffrey Epstein and many other things like that, rather than just dismissing this and saying, oh, it's all a lie. They don't know what's going on in the White House. The Trump administration owns it. Instead of denying that it ever happened. I mean, they're not even good liars. They lie all the time about deals that he's got or whatever, or what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz and the war. But when it comes to this, instead, what he says, well, I think somebody's recording the conversations there. That's about as close as you can get to putting a seal of approval and saying, yeah, it's all gospel truth.
The salacious, juicy details in this book are so accurate, it makes me worry that they had a listening device.
That's right. It's crazy.
It's the sort of thing you'd put in a quote on the cover.
That's right. That's what they should do with their press releases on this. So again, the book is called Regime Change, and rather than deny it, he freaks out about it and validates it. We're afraid some of our most secret conversations are being recorded, and we have no idea which ones. They look like fools because they are fools. Excerpt from Halberman and Swan's book, released last week, detailed another crisis that consumed the Trump White House back in 2025, the Epstein issue. So they reported a critical White House Situation Room meeting in July of 2025, chaired by J.D. Vance, where top officials plotted a response to the growing furor around the Justice Department's decision to halt releases from the Epstein case files. And of course, if you look at that excerpt from it, everybody was dumping it on Pam Bondi. And you had Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were furious with Bondi, wanted her fired and so forth. And yet they also lied. They also said, well, there's nobody involved except for Jeffrey Epstein. We got all these women who were raped, and it's not. It's only Jeffrey Epstein. There's no perpetrators, just victims, right? And they released the names of the victims. So all this is happening again as a backdrop. As I pointed out earlier, the Trump administration, War Pete, and U.S. Southern Command are boasting about their war crimes. And they are war crimes, folks. Capital punishment without due process. This is exactly the kind of stuff, and I mentioned this the first time it happened. And then we found out later on that very first attack, it was only partially destroyed. They had survivors in the water, so they went back and executed the survivors in the water. But I said when it happened, I said, this is exactly what Duterte did when he was president of the Philippines. He started doing extrajudicial killing of people by the police simply because, well, I think that guy's part of a drug gang, so let's just kill them all, right? And they did that. And now Duterte and several others are facing prosecution in the International Criminal Court, which Trump and Pete Hegseth should be punished there. But of course they won't. They'll get away with it because, not because they didn't commit the crime, but because they're powerful enough they can get away with it. That should concern us. It really should. And it's exactly the same what they're doing. At my direction, says the White House, the United States Southern Command delivered a swift and lethal kinetic strike, that's the euphemism for extrajudicial killings, to successfully execute Nino Guerrero, the infamous leader of the Tren de Aragua gang. So again, even somebody who's caught on video in a capital crime should be given due process. That is something that we have always stood for in America and in the West, and it's something that we should continue to stand for. And of course, not to be left out of it, War Pete also boasts of his killing again. Yeah, he'll kill for Jesus, right? What I was talking about earlier in terms of the flying beer cooler, Lance, was the Pentagon's next generation of kamikaze drone, and again, mass-produced air power. This is so much like the novel that you clued me in on with Daniel Suarez, Kill Decision, which I think is about a decade old now. And what is happening is, just as he had posited, swarms of drones would completely upend the military-industrial complex. And it would be a windfall for the military-industrial complex. Because now it's like, yeah, we sold you all of those billion-dollar bombers, but now we're going, those are all obsolete. So now you need to do this over here, right? And we got a whole new category of weapons, and everybody's got to get involved in this particular arm race. It's kind of interesting. Lance picked up on this before me in terms of the 3D printer stuff, and you were absolutely right about it. Of course, that's what my son does. What Trump's son does is he buys interests in these Israeli drone companies. He doubles down on the evil. Lance pointed it out, and you got Don Jr., I think it was the one who jumped in on it. Well, what they're saying is they do these things not with 3D printers. 3D printers would be what the average people would be able to do, but these people mass produce it with steam chest molding. Same process they do for beer coolers, bike helmets, and the packaging that your TV arrived in. So they're not going to be shipping TVs, they're going to be shipping bombs to people. And that is what the future holds. This is the dystopian society that is upon us while we are distracted with the price of bread and the circuses on the White House lawn. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
We have some comments if you wanted to get.
Oh, yeah. Before we go, let me respond to those. IRS Machine Gun, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And he liked the show. He said, Fidgety Guy, thank you. He says, one day when my Kabbalah teacher, and he's got the name there, Aitan Yardeni, asked how I was doing, I told him I needed a break. I was thoroughly exhausted, overwhelmed, and overworked. Donald Trump said that on the way to the top. P88.
I imagine that's page 88 of his book, The Way to the Top. He's talking about how overworked he was by his Kabbalah teacher.
Threw me off because of capital P. How about that? He's got a Kabbalah teacher. No doubt about it. Well, you know, and we didn't have time to talk about this, but Javier Milei has converted to the Chabad Lubavitch cult. And he's out there talking about giving legal protection to companies that are started and run by AI. I mean, that's what these people are into. It sure is pure evil. Well, we didn't even get to talk to, I wonder who Steven Spielberg's Kabbalah teacher is. But he did his witchcraft movie over the weekend. And of course, when you look at the logo of that thing, it truly is amazing. But, whoop, wrong one, sorry. Here it is. This is the logo. Nothing occult about that, is there? Yeah. An eyeball? Are we supposed to believe that these aliens from another galaxy evolved and have eyes that look just like our eyes, right? Yeah, that's right. It is occultic. It is screaming the occult, isn't it? Well, that's all for today, and we thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.